so think 15 years ago, not today. The context of 15 years ago. Right? To be exact, actually 13. They wanted to understand the effect of hallucination in terms of how people like view their reality. And so in real time, right? And so people who were on all sort of drugs were getting high in all sorts of way, and they wanted to capture like their reported experience as it was happening in real time. And so I was one of the interns at the institute. I just started my career. And who would they send? They would send like the interns to actually be in these odd contexts. There's a lot of legality that we needed to go through to actually record that. It's basically do like survey, but like face to face and like writing the. So I got to learn a lot about human beings and their state of mind and all type of jargon I never thought I would learn about. So that was my fun story.
I didn't get to take part in that study. No, we had, I saw my quiz up, so we have questions from the audience.
So I guess I'm going to go with my example of bizarre studies, because I think we have different definitions. I got a study from one of my friends who works in Europe. He's like, hey Mike, I just want to study on adult toys. Can you help me with this? I'm like, no, I'm not getting involved with that. So that's my bizarre study. Shut that down really quick. So I guess my question is in terms of something that was not touched upon. I have a friend who's a privacy lawyer, and we're doing an event for the AMA in Stamford, Connecticut on social listening, ironically enough, in a couple months. One of the key questions when we're looking at data scraping, especially with GDPR and CCPA, which is the California Privacy Act, which is coming into effect on January 1st, is the question of legitimate interest when harvesting data and user consent. So we know that, like, for example, Ben, I know you were talking about consumer products, which are generally that information is publicly available. I was just curious with J&J's, when we're talking about pharmaceutical development and listening for more sensitive product categories, just from a compliance perspective with the changing regulatory landscape, how's that being managed? How do we stay within the context of legitimate interest? Are we thinking of these questions? Am I out here in like compliance land on my own? Or just kind of what's the thought from a practice point of view as we know the laws are changing here?
Yeah, compliance is a huge part of social listening. So we don't do a lot of pharmaceutical topics in consumer because our whole pharmaceutical sector does that. But I guess in our OTC space, you would have similar conversations to them. But everything we do is based on publicly available information. So when we're choosing a vendor to work with, we make sure that in the nature of their product, it's only giving us the data that we're allowed to look at. So we were talking about Facebook earlier. A lot of Facebook is private conversation, and so we don't get a lot of our information from there. But then you look at Twitter, and everything is basically publicly available. So a lot of our data comes from Twitter, it comes from news sites, blogs, forums. So part of that is just vetting the right people to work with to make sure that their product is compliant. But then from an internal perspective, we always monitor what we call adverse events. So if we're doing social listening on a product and we see that a consumer said that this product did something that it wasn't supposed to, we have internal compliance regulations for that. And that's hugely important in doing social listening. And there's always a risk when you're looking at raw data and raw consumer conversation that you're going to see product quality complaints, adverse events. That's something we absolutely pay attention to.
Any other questions? Okay.
How do you pick, or do you pick the sites that you're actually going to monitor? Is there a way of making it more efficient? Take contact lenses or skincare.
So we generally we use platforms that have a lot of different sites available. So it could be Twitter, it could be Amazon, it could be Instagram. A lot of times what we'll do is start with a wide range and then maybe find out that if we're listening for trends in beauty, maybe it's more focused on Instagram, and then we'll hone in our research on Instagram. So some of that is just exploration. But if it's something that, maybe we know there's a certain website out there that is housing a lot of the conversation ahead of time, then we'll choose to crawl that website, something like that, if it's not already being done by the platform.
Yeah, one of the companies that wasn't mentioned, I don't believe it was mentioned, if it were, excuse me, but I didn't hear it mentioned very often, was Google. And it seems like Google, if I'm not mistaken, is the master of data. How many times do we Google every day? They bring up news feeds that I want to see, that I don't know I want to see until I see it. And they're moving into a situation where we see like Minority Report situation, where we're going to have information on products that we don't know yet until we see it that we want to buy. And I just wonder what your perspective is on how can we, what does Google have, and what are you guys, how are you trying to work with Google? Because ultimately you want to use the data to promote a better product for Johnson & Johnson or a better product for IBM, or I'm not quite sure what your startup metrics are, but what is your feeling on Google and how it's playing in the field and getting to that point, which actually may be quite good? I mean, we like to look at Google News. I mean,
Should I take that one?
I'm not working with Google.
Okay.
I don't, again, because of my internal focus on IBM employees, I don't foresee it happening. I know what you're talking about, how a person, people at IBM who are externally facing might use it. I'm not so sure because of our B2B orientation. I guess, yes, we're interested in line of business executives and CIOs, or people in similar roles to CIOs. The Chief Technology Officer, if we had particular insights of what they're looking at or looking for on Google, I suppose that might be interesting. Just back to GDPR, I mean, we're very aware of that, the California movement, the Japan movement. I assume it will be a worldwide movement, and any study conducted at IBM that involves identification of anything is reviewed by a GDPR privacy assessment board. In certain studies we ask people to opt in. In certain studies we ask people not to reveal certain things if we think they might do that. I don't know, I can see the Google thing, or I mean the Facebook thing, another company that's deep into that ocean. There's all sorts of issues involved in
there's
that.
also a lot of good too. But,
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if my theory is going to turn out correct, but I think we're going to see a backlash. And this is what I mean. If you were to look at the last 10 years, platforms were in charge. Whether it's Google, whether it's Facebook, right? Like everything got fed to you. And especially after what happened the last few years with Facebook, if you were to look at, so it's Facebook, but I think the same is applying as well to Google in a way. Consumers are becoming in charge in the sense that now everybody is way more aware of what could technology do and how it can learn and influence your decisions. So there is awareness, and with the awareness there is discomfort. So it's not that surprising that if you were to look at like the trends of like Facebook, it's been declining in terms of how much people share about themselves. I mean, you can argue there is rise on Instagram, but that's a little bit of a different, its own analytics. 10 years ago, you would walk into the supermarket and you had 2 bottles of water to maybe 5 brands to select from. Now you walk in and there's about 50. And the war is gonna be, I think, around platforms capturing what you want to capture. So you're gonna control that narrative. You're gonna say what I'm interested in and what I'm not interested in. And with that, there is pros and cons because they have to capture you. We live in the economy of attention. Like who's gonna capture you? Who's gonna get your sympathy? Who's gonna activate you? And that to an extent is gonna depend on what you put out in the world. In the digital media space, across all platforms, from Google to Facebook to LinkedIn and everything in between, and how you curate it for yourself. So in that regard, I actually do think that platforms are going to be way more reactive to how you curate your data, knowing that your data is going to be curated.
Let's do one more question. I know we're getting close to 8, but if you promise it's a simple question. You know, you can't.
I'm more interested in like in tools and techniques probably. Like for example, when you do social listening and you want to know like opinions about certain things, how do you like scrape that? Do you like look for keywords, or do you do like a search on topic, or just like a hashtag on Twitter? How do you exactly like scrape that?
All of the above.
Yeah.
But how do you decide on keywords? Like, do you have a certain person sitting down and saying, this is the list of words which you need to follow?
It's not usually one person, it's usually a group, but yes, I mean, it depends on the objective of the study, but yes, it might be identification of a group of hashtags, a taxonomy of words, it's not usually one thing. You know, like just searching hashtag IBM, it could be I.B.M, International Business Machines, it could use the CEO's name, you know, who knows? Big Blue, there's all sorts of things that might be the criteria for how we're going to scrape and listen.
A word cloud is automatically generated though by the software. So you're not really making any selections on what sort of words to look for. It just looks through the data and pulls out the most prominent, frequently
Yeah.
noted
Yeah,
words.
Unsupervised. Well,
Yeah, unsupervised.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You have to get rid of the junk though, as you were saying, right? So
yeah, we didn't talk about the junk in detail, but there's a lot of junk.
there's a lot of junk that needs to be cleaned out, right?
Yes.
Well, that's great. So I hope everybody got something out of this, and we're going to thank our speakers again for coming out tonight in the rain. For the election panel, please hang out. There's still wine. There's still food out here. People with green stars don't get out of here without talking about it. If we have council members here, raise your hands. See one of them. Don't be shy. They'll be able to find out more about the organization. Rafa is here from Digital Analytics. So